He was being evicted, but forgot that his unit never left a man behind. He fought for a country that promised never to forget, but decades later, with no family, no pension, and a foreclosure notice in hand, he stood at his window and asked no one for help. Then one quiet voice online turned into a wave, and the uniform he folded so many years ago came back to unfold around him. Welcome to The Last Stand, where we tell the stories of forgotten courage, quiet sacrifice, and the unshakable bonds that never truly fade. Today, we follow a man who thought his war was long over until the battle found him again, right on his front porch. But this time, he wouldn't fight alone. On the outskirts of Washington, there stood a small house, its wooden panels faded to gray. The roof sagged slightly, the mailbox rusted with age. But just in front of the window, one thing never failed. The American flag, raised every morning at exactly 7:00 a.m. That duty belonged to the old man inside, retired Corporal Henry Callahan. Henry was 82 years old. At 19, he had been sent to Vietnam. He survived and came back. But when he returned, no one understood him. And truth be told, no one had really been waiting for him either. He lived quietly for decades, never married. Barely kept in touch with family. With neighbors, only exchanged polite greetings. But the flag, he never failed the flag. The inside of his house was simple. An old brown armchair, a wartime footlocker, and on the walls a few photographs. His unit in black and white, a medal hanging in the corner, and a folded American flag in the center. It wasn't a museum. It was a shelter. Henry's only steady income was Social Security. He had bought the house back in 1973, but over time, everything changed. The neighborhood rose in value, property taxes climbed, medical bills mounted. A few years earlier, he had taken out a second mortgage, but in recent months, he had fallen behind. And one morning, it all began with a paper slipped under his door. Mr. Henry Callahan, this document serves as notice that your right of ownership has expired, and you are hereby ordered to vacate the premises. Holding the paper in his hand, his lips muttered only one line. I bled for this country, but no one heard it. Because in that house, at that moment, there was no one else. In the days that followed, more envelopes piled up in his mailbox. From the bank, from the court, from a realtor. He didn't open them. Or maybe he simply didn't want to. Perhaps he still believed there might be a way out. Perhaps he was just buying time. But time was merciless. The court order was final. His house would be emptied in a matter of weeks. On the same street lived a young woman, Rosa Martinez. 28 years old, a nurse, mother of two. Rosa often saw Henry every morning walking to his mailbox. But one day, she noticed something different. The old man had dropped his letters and, while bending to pick them up, lost his balance and collapsed to his knees. Rosa rushed over to help. Henry looked embarrassed, thanked her, but avoided her eyes. I'm fine, he said. Didn't fall, just the wind. Rosa glanced at the papers in his hand and saw the truth. An eviction order, court, stamped, and the date was soon. That night, after putting her kids to bed, Rosa sat down at her laptop. Curious, she typed into Google, Henry Callahan, Vietnam. She found a few old clippings, a headline from 1969, Callahan Squad, saved 5 soldiers behind enemy lines. Her eyes welled up. She picked up her phone and wrote, This old man lives on our street, quiet, proud, alone. He saved his unit in Vietnam. Now they're throwing him out of his home. What happened to us? Henry Callahan. She added a photo. Henry, in his worn postal jacket, shuffling toward his mailbox. In the first few hours, only a handful of likes. By the next morning, 200. By evening, 1, 0. The day after, over 10, 0. And the comments began. My father was a Vietnam vet. We can't let this happen. This is shameful. Where's his unit? No veteran should be left like this. If you throw him out, you throw us all out. But the real turning point came the following night with a single comment. The username was different. It read, Former Lieutenant Jack Harmon, 3rd Tactical Air Wing. His words were simple. This man was our sergeant. He kept us alive in the jungle for 3 days with no supplies. If I don't stand up for him now, I betray my own honor. Hang on, Sarge. We're on our way. Rain had begun to fall. Droplets tapped gently against Henry's window, but he barely noticed. That morning, for the first time in 34 years, the flag had not been raised. Rosa stood outside her house, watching cars go by. Her post about Henry had spread far, but she thought maybe it would remain just another online story. Until a van turned the corner. The door opened, and 3 men stepped out. Their clothes were plain, but their stance carried discipline. One of them spoke in a deep voice. "Does Corporal Callahan live here?" Rosa froze. Her voice cracked. Are you from his unit?" The man nodded. "Not just his unit. His family. They were the remnants of Henry's old squad. Lieutenant Jack Harmon had sparked it all, writing in a private veterans forum. We owe Callahan. When we were pinned down by Viet Cong, hope was gone, but he found a way out. He went hungry so we could eat. If he's alone now, then that's our shame." The message spread quickly. 9 old soldiers, scattered across the country from Arizona to North Carolina to Alaska, packed what they could and traveled. Some came leaning on canes, others still steady on their feet. Retired, civilian, but united by a single vow: we stand by our sergeant. When they knocked, Henry didn't answer at first. Then he peeked through the curtain, his eyes widened. He opened the door, and there stood Jack, once under his command, now an old man with a retired colonel's insignia. "Sergeant," Jack said, "we're late, but we're here." Henry's first words came in a whisper. You're still alive?" Then his hands trembled, his voice cracked. "I'm not well, boys, but if you are, that's enough." Jack reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is our first fund. The squad raised it just for you." It wasn't the money that mattered. For the first time in decades, Henry felt someone telling him, "You earned this." The reunion fueled a second wave online. Local news picked up Rosa's video. Soon, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, every network ran the story. 82-year-old Vietnam veteran facing eviction, but his brothers, in arms, returned. Within hours, the hashtag Callahan trended nationwide. Veterans associations, nonprofits, housing programs stepped in. The VA opened an emergency review of his case. For the first time in years, Henry's file wasn't just paperwork, it was a cause. But the most unexpected moment came the next morning in an envelope left at his door, stamped, Department of the Army. Inside, only a short note. "Mr. Henry Callahan, this institution remembers you. We are proud of you. And what needs to be done, will be done. Major General R.J. Carter." Henry sat by his window that morning and pulled his uniform from the footlocker. He ran his hand across the jacket. A faint smear of jungle mud still clung from 1969. He folded the flag over the jacket. When Rosa walked in, she didn't see tears, only resolve. "I didn't fight for a country," Henry said. "I fought for its children. And now, those children came back." Rosa pressed her hand to her mouth. "Yes, Henry, they came back. And they found you at home." The next day, the Callahan home came alive. Volunteers repaired the roof. A furniture company refurnished the living room. A news crew captured it all, but Henry made one request. "Don't air it. Just make sure my flag flies again." The walls of Henry Callahan's house were freshly painted, but the darkness inside him was harder to cover. 82 years of weight could not be lifted by a single helping hand. Yet one morning, he noticed something different. He wasn't alone anymore. In the kitchen, a volunteer brewed coffee. In the yard, someone fixed the flagpole. In the living room, a young man polished the old footlocker. They had come from different towns for one reason only. A man like you cannot be left behind. When the repairs were finished, Henry no longer had just a house, he had a home. Everything was in place: a comfortable chair, an easy-access shower, a new stove, warm blankets, and curtains that let in the morning light. But the most meaningful change was what hung by the front door, a framed photo with a simple inscription: 3rd Tactical Air Wing, 1969. We exist not for the forgetful, but for those who remember. In the photo, a young Henry stood, not smiling but standing tall. At his side was Jack. Behind him, Billy and George. And now, half a century later, they were back again, older, slower, but present. As the story spread nationwide, Henry's mailbox overflowed. Handmade cards arrived from schoolchildren, scribbled with crayon. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Henry." 23 came from a single kindergarten. A woman wrote a long letter about her own father, also a Vietnam veteran who drifted into isolation. She ended with, "Knowing your story helps me forgive my dad a little more." A man sent a check covering 3 months of Henry's rent. His note read, "I was once a soldier under your command. Now it's my turn." Support wasn't only financial. Rosa's husband, a retired history professor, invited Henry to speak at a small college panel. Henry resisted. "I'm no speaker. I took orders. I didn't give them." But Jack insisted. "Sarge, your story doesn't command, it inspires." And so, one morning, Henry hobbled up to the podium with his cane. 300 students filled the hall. His first words, "At 19, I went to war not knowing what war was. At 82, I see love for the first time, and I don't know what to do with it." The room went silent. Then the applause came. But Henry's eyes fixed on just one thing, a small American flag stitched to the cap of a student in the back row. One evening, Rosa knocked with a small radio speaker. "I have a surprise for you," she said. "People want to be heard by you." She pressed play. Voices came, one after another. "Mr. Callahan, we owe you. You may have forgotten us, but we never forgot you. I tell my children about you now." "Your life became part of our freedom," Henry asked quietly where the voices came from. Rosa replied, "All over. Veterans, teachers, young people, just people who wanted you to hear them." Henry lowered his head. "I don't watch TV, Rosa, but a human voice, nothing replaces that." Slowly, Henry's steps grew steadier, his sleep deeper, his voice stronger. He was no longer just surviving, he was being seen. And one morning, at exactly 7:00 a.m., he walked outside with the flag again. His steps were slow, his hands unsteady, but he reached the pole. This time, he wasn't alone. Rosa stood nearby. Jack stood beside her. And as the flag rose, a passerby stopped, placed his hand over his heart, then another, then another. No parade had been planned, but that morning, on a quiet street, a ceremony had taken place. Days passed. Henry no longer checked the mailbox for bad news, because what filled it now wasn't debt, but proof that he was remembered. Letters addressed not to a number, but to a name. One morning, coffee in hand, he walked to the window. His hands trembled slightly on the sill, but outside the air was clear. In the yard, Rosa's 2 boys played, laughing, pretending to march like soldiers. Henry smiled. "Sometimes the future of a nation rests in a single smile," he whispered. Then he turned back and eased into his chair. In the quietest corner of the house sat a new table. On it, just a few items. A rusty whistle from Vietnam. A handwritten letter. "When you came back, my mother finally stopped crying. Thank you." And a framed inscription. "I did not forget them, because they did not forget me." Henry called it the silent table. Sometimes Rosa's boys would wander near it, and he would simply say, "No talking here, children, only thinking." And they learned that silence had meaning. When a podcaster asked Henry for an interview, he chuckled. "I don't tell stories. I carried orders, not words." But when the recording aired, one line struck everyone. "I learned to carry a rifle, then I learned to carry silence. But the hardest thing I ever carried was loneliness." That sentence spread across social media. The hashtag carrying silence caught fire. Veterans, widows, even civilians began sharing their own burdens. Henry was no longer just a veteran, he had become a symbol. Autumn arrived. The leaves turned yellow, but Henry still raised his flag each morning. Slow steps, shaky hands, but steady resolve. Until one morning, the flag did not rise. At 7:15, Rosa knocked. No answer. She used her spare key and found Henry in his chair, head tilted, at peace. In his hand was an envelope. On it, a single name, Rosa. Inside, only a note. "I did not die alone. I left this world as part of a unit. The only thing I never managed to say was thank you. The time has come now." And beneath it, in his shaky handwriting, "Never forget the flag." Henry's funeral was not grand, but it was profound. No marching band, no headlines, but every hand pressed to a heart. His old squad placed their medals on his casket. Rosa's two boys carried the flag he had raised every morning. Across the wooden lid, one line was carved. He was not a forgotten man, he was only silent. At the graveside, an old man leaned on his cane and knelt Lieutenant Jack Harmon. "Sergeant, we were once under your command. Now the watch is ours." This was more than one man's story. It was the story of a nation's conscience. Henry Callahan was no general. He was not a man of speeches or medals. But he became the voice of countless silent warriors who lived and died unseen. To honor a veteran is not just to pin a ribbon. Sometimes it is simply to stand beside them. Because some battles are fought in silence, and remembering those silent warriors is our duty.